All right. So we have the beginning, the Declaration of Independence, and I, I know obviously that's the title, but it's something to think about because it's become such like an institution in our mind of like, this is when these people are coming together and saying, "Screw you, Britain! Like we're done." The nation that birthed them is no longer their mother. This is them coming together to declare their independence. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, all heard that one. The unanimous declaration of the 13th United States of America, right? And at this point, they're they're all different states. It's not one country, it's a bunch of people coming together. All right. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel this impel them to the separation. So they're going all the way back, right? We have to remember that these guys are Enlightenment thinkers. Locke, Rousseau, they did a lot of stuff about like where do nations come from, how do they form, going all the way back to like their primitive, state of nature type thing. They probably don't know what cavemen are, but they can guess. And so the founders are really going all the way back, the course of human events. They're situating themselves in the broader course of human history. It becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which tie them to another, which have connected them to another. They're thinking about this relationship with Britain, empires being ruled by foreigners, and they're coming together. They're dissolving these bands. They are declaring their independence. And what they realized, like in any breakup, you have to. I know this is pertinent. You have to state your reasons. You can't just be like, "Oh, I'm done." Right? That's not
Right.
chill. And so that's what they're doing here. If they are to, as they say, as if the colonists are to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, right? They are becoming an independent, separate, sovereign nation. They are trying to assume those powers among themselves. They have to give reasons, right? They don't want to be on the wrong side of history. They want to make sure that their cause is well understood. So that's just the first stanza. Is just like, hey, we are about to lay down the law. This is what we're thinking, and Great Britain, get ready because we're about to come slinging. So then we get the heavy hitting line, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are not self-evident, right? This is kind of the revolutionary part of this. And this is why the document, beyond its impact of breaking America free, is so profoundly important, because they state and they back it up with a war that every human being, they say man, it's interpreted now, I think everyone should interpret it, that every person is equal, right? They are endowed by their creator, by their very act of being born a human being on this planet, that they are endowed by the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, what's interesting is John Locke was like, life, liberty, and property. That's the unalienable fundamental rights. And that was a huge part of the reason that the colonists fought and rebelled, is to say that, hey, you're screwing with our property, taxation without representation, you're selling your tea, we're going to toss in the harbor, yada, yada, yada. You need to respect us and our property. And they changed that here. Thomas Jefferson is like, no, property is only a means to an end. It's the happiness, the general welfare, that the phrase that comes up in the Constitution later. That's what is necessary: life, liberty, and happiness. And throughout this whole thing, this does not get very nitty gritty. It's actually quite short, the Declaration of Independence. And this is the ideology of America here. This, plus I'd say the preamble of the Constitution, is the ethos that our country is founded on. Then you get into nitty gritty 75% and 2/3 or whatever types of legislation, but here is what this country stands for. We are endowed by our creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but those, it's not limited to those. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So The only reason that we have governments is to protect our life, our liberty, and our pursuit of happiness. That's the purpose of government. And governments only derive their just powers, right? They can only be just governments, wield their powers with justice from the consent of the governed. That means that every other country, every other government on the planet at this point is not just, is a force of injustice, in fact, because it's some monarchy, it's some, from on high, random, trickling down of power that did not derive its sovereignty from the just consent of the governed. So not only are they saying, this is how governments are formed, this is where they get their justice, but they're sending a shot across the bow of every other country that you are not fairly governing your people. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, of the ends of life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So the fact that Great Britain is attacking our life, liberty, or our happiness means that it is our right. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish that government. It is not the king who has absolute sovereignty. It is the people. That is where justice lies, is the consent of the governed. And now that life, liberty, and property, life, liberty, and happiness are threatened, it is our right to alter and abolish this status quo. And that is why we are declaring our independence. And it's laying the foundation of the government on the principles and organizing its powers to protect and carry forward the safety and happiness of the people. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Let's not get into revolution willy-nilly, right? This is not a fun thing. It's not an easy thing. It's not something to just dive into because the tax collector is being really difficult, right? Anarchy is bad. People die in revolutions, right? There's basically no bloodless revolutions. People will suffer, and the status quo will be altered and oftentimes made worse off. Nevertheless, when a government practices injustice, it becomes necessary, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Right? So people are used to the status quo. They're just going to chill out. They're not going to screw things up, and that's fine, right? Like, people will deal with suffering. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce the people, them, under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That's the best line in the whole thing. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, right? When you show up with your tea monopoly and you're taxing our shit and you're being annoying and you're quartering your troops in our houses, this long train of abuses and usurpations forces us, right? It invariably pursues the same object. The same object is tyranny, is despotism, is grinding the American colonists under the boot heels of redcoats in Boston. It is the people's right. We've already established that. But beyond that, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards, a new government for the security of the people and their rights. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. Right? We are now in a position where we have no option, we have no choice but to throw off the government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. The rest of the document is a list that goes on, and I don't think we need to do it unless you're studying for your AP US history exam. But it's just bullet points of of things that the king and his government have done, which have ground the colonists down and deprived them of their rights, that they believe themselves to be entitled to: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, property, just representation, stuff like that. All right.